Welcome to the New Planner Podcast, where it's all about helping you successfully enter the financial planning profession and accelerate your financial planning career. This podcast will help you understand the profession, become familiar with the various career paths available to you, and avoid the mistakes that limit your success. Join your host, Caleb Brown, to explore the human side of creating a successful planning career through interviews, personal experience, and insights from the trenches. Let's get started.
Welcome to the 171st episode of the New Planner Podcast. This is Caleb Brown, your host. My guest today is Jason McGarraugh, a financial advisor with BentOak Capital in Houston, Texas. Listen as Jason shares his background from growing up on a farm, how being exposed to his grandparents' estate planning got him interested in a career as a financial planner, but why he actually started his career in the food service industry. Check out the middle two, where he talks about how he had to overcome a less than stellar GPA to gain admittance into the graduate school, how he progressed through the program, passed the CFP exam, and secured a position as a retiring advisor's succession plan. Listen to the end two, where he talks about buying out the retiring advisor who bought him into the business, and why he recently made a change to another firm so he could provide a better service and experience to his clients, plus some tips for new planners. If you think the key to success in financial planning is all based on luck, then this episode is for you. Hey, Jason, welcome to the New Planner Podcast.
Happy to be here, Caleb. Good to see you again.
It has been a minute. Always great to chat with a fellow Texas Tech alum and just a good buddy, right? So we go way back. It's been a while since we caught up, but we go way back. So maybe if you would just start us out with why you even went to Texas Tech and majored in financial planning.
Well, I kind of got the bug for financial planning, I'd say back in the mid to late 80s. My great-grandfather settled in the Texas Panhandle. Perryton, Texas was created in 1919. My great-grandfather and his brother settled there, and my grandfather was the youngest of 7. My father was the youngest of 4. I'm the youngest of 2. You can kind of see how, as the machinery got bigger, the family sizes got smaller. But my grandfather and my father let me sit in on the estate planning, financial planning meetings for my grandfather's farm. So I'm 4th generation. My kids will be 5th generation. My grandfather died in 1989. So the estate plan, bypass trusts and family limited partnership. The estate plan was set in motion in 1989. My grandmother passed away at 102 and a half in 2021. So
Wow.
That estate planning process did not go full cycle till 2021, 2022, when my dad settled everything out. So that whole process, being exposed to, had no idea what they're talking about, but having my grandfather, grandmother, father, uncles, aunts, all at the same table. And it was life insurance planning with an estate planning attorney out of Lubbock, and pretty simple bypass trust setup. But my grandfather, he probably could have left all of his boys over $1 million, but didn't want to just give it outright. Wanted to incentivize everybody to play nicely together, but not shackle them together. So it was the family limited partnership. And my dad and 2 of his 3 brothers still today run the family farm. But since grandma passed away, everything that was my grandfather's and grandmother's has been separated to the 4 families. And when I say 4 families, my dad and his 3 older brothers. That lit the spark back in the 80s.
Hey, but Jason, before we go any further, just let me stop you. Some of our listeners may not know what a bypass trust is. Can you just give a brief, what is that?
Back when it was put together, let's say in the 70s and 80s, the estate tax exclusion was $300,000, maybe less. Now it's upwards of $12 million plus per person. So with a farm of over 7,000 acres of operating farmland and equipment, and now land in Perryton, Texas is not like land in Iowa. It's a good amount of money, but it's not, you can do nothing for the rest of your life money. It's just simply utilizing the exclusion that you've got, transferring assets into the trust so that you don't have estate tax issues. Now, most families today don't have estate tax issues because that exemption amount is so large. But back then, it didn't take much to have an estate tax issue. 40-45% estate taxes, you get to those upper brackets pretty quick. So the bypass or AB trust setup was designed just to take advantage of both exclusion amounts for spouses and get everything out. But when grandmother passed away, all of those trusts dissolved upon her passing, so everything's gone back. They use the original will to determine who got what piece of land, and each of the boys had since purchased some other additional land. So now we're primarily running the family limited partnership, owns all of the farm equipment, but each family member owns their land and they farm it as a partnership.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's quite the history of the McGarraugh family, but also that's some Texas history in there too.
Yes.
Settling the panhandle, it's a big deal. So you were at the table. Then what did you do? Did you go to Texas? Because you got your master's degree in financial planning.
I graduated high school in 1995. My cousins all went to Tech. So Tech was the only school I applied to. And I had this little flame of, I want to do financial planning, estate planning. I'll study finance. And was probably my junior year before I really figured out that Tech had a financial planning department, but only at the undergraduate. It's weird that it worked out the way it did, but I'm glad it did because Gustafson was one of my very first professors. And I'm going to have to ask him why he never recruited me. And I've got a sinking suspicion I probably wasn't up to his caliber at the time. I needed some maturing. But anyway, worked for dining services, got a job on campus my second day there. Went to Tech because my family had gone there, studied finance because I thought it would get me to understanding financial planning, but it was all corporate finance and accounting. By the time I graduated, it was December 1999, not a great time to have a business degree. The job prospects weren't there, but my dining services job, I was 3/4 time full with 3/4 benefits. I had accidentally built a whole career in food service and dining services because that was my job. And as a farm, working was always my hobby. I was an excellent employee and moved up the ladder from washing pots and pans to when I graduated. I was an administrative level assistant manager for the director of dining service.
I think getting started at a farm had something to do with that, right? I rarely hear anybody say like, oh, that person that we hired that grew up on a farm, they're a slacker. They don't work.
Yeah.
I've never heard that and never will probably.
Oh, working in a kitchen was like a vacation. And I got fed all the time. So it was great. But I knew that when I was flipping through the grad catalog, I wasn't going to take a lower level job opportunity in banking and credit for less money than I was already making on campus. So I decided to take a few extra accounting classes, figure out what I wanted to do, started looking into graduate school, was flipping through the catalog and saw Gustafson's name and remembered it. And my office was just across from Human Sciences. Walked across, knocked on Gustafson's door, opened it, introduced myself, and immediately remembered who I was, remembered where I was from. Hadn't seen him in 4 years.
Well, and it's also amazing to me, too, that a university with 25,000 or approximately students, like you can do that. You can just walk over and like,
yeah,
and he didn't lose track of you.
Well, I rocked around campus like I owned the place anyway, so. But he was approachable, and I remember him being approachable. It was just kind of happenstance, but I knew that the undergraduate, I wasn't active enough in that corporate finance program. I didn't develop any connections. What I did is I developed connections through my job, dining services. To this day, when I go back to Lubbock, I still drop in and talk with all of them. So the decision to go to graduate school, the program had just started the master's. The financial planning program, back then, personal financial planning program, had just created the master's program. And I was actually in that first big cohort of graduate students that started in the program. But I sat down with Gustafson, met Dr. Hampton and the other professors, went to the graduate school, applied, and got in on conditional status. My letters of recommendation from my money banking and credit professor, and my boss was the director of dining services, which after athletics was the largest department on campus. But my grades in the BA were, I think, a 2.97. I always say I had a 3, but they were concerned I wouldn't be able to. They had to tell me, you need to keep a 3.5 GPA, Jason, or 3.25. I nodded my head. I was definitely up to the task, but I always like to tell that story. After graduating with the leadership award, I actually got in on conditional status. And when the professors were talking about tightening up their requirements, and I was there at that conversation, and I looked at Gustafson and said, you realize under these requirements, y'all never would have let me in to the program. Adding some of that, it's not always the grades. It's the passion. By the time I started grad school, I knew this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make a concerted effort to build relationships in the area that I wanted to work in.
Got it. Because you and I were in some classes, and I know I've always sort of ribbed you because I was in undergrad. I'm like, Jason's over here sitting on the other side of the room, and he's getting a master's degree. I'm like, what the heck? This is bunk.
That's right.
But I know you guys had to do like extra projects, and the curves weren't as good.
And they didn't have the 150 program for you guys yet. Y'all just bad timing, Caleb. Bad timing.
But we also so we progressed through our respective degrees, and then we went and took the CFP exam together, didn't we?
I had a short stint in Singapore before the CFP exam. Dr. Hopkins had handed me an email. I lived up in human sciences because I was Dr. Bagwell's graduate assistant, helped her start Red to Black. And that was a pivotal point in, starting Red to Black with her, sitting in a class. It was probably one of the classes we took together was counseling. And Dr. Bagwell was tasked with starting a student-based financial counseling center for on campus. And I quit my 3/4 time job for a graduate assistant position that paid 1/3 of what I was making in dining.
Can you just give us a sense? This was a long time ago. What were you making as a dining person?
I was administrative management, $28,000 a year.
Okay. All right.
And I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And then I had 3/4 benefits, 3/4 time. The best part was I had a yellow sticker with an H on it. I could park anywhere on campus I wanted.
That is worth its weight in gold right there.
Any maintenance spot around any dining hall, I could park it. And having to give that up, that was almost worse than giving up the paycheck. But Dottie hired me on as her graduate assistant to build Red to Black. But I took a substantial pay cut, about 1/3. I was making maybe $7,000-8,000 a year. It was only spring and fall semesters, so I was effectively, she couldn't pay me in the summer. I was working for free. I went back to dining services, washing pots and pans in the summer and working for Dottie for free. Wow. And then the next summer I got my internship at Pennington Bass. They brought me on as a second intern. To this day, I still think that was just them feeling sorry for me, bringing me on. Jennifer Deaver now, was my boss, and she was in school with us. So, but I knew it in my heart that this was what I wanted to do. I had taken stock of not making the connections through academics and through undergrad, but I'd made connections in dining. I had built a career that could have been very fruitful going forward, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. So making that conscious step to go 2-3 steps backwards, to reset and take full advantage of the graduate school opportunity and being part of Texas Tech's financial planning department, which was that's when it really exploded. And kind of not quite notoriety. It had been known around our industry for quite a while, that graduate school explosion and the undergrad numbers went up. But that was a fun time to be there. Being at Tech in the 90s and early 2000s was fun.
I mean, this is interesting. I mean, you're like a career changer, but you were still in school. I don't know that we've had one of those before.
Well, you got to take into account, I got my first paycheck for working a 12-hour day when I was 6. So being a farm kid, I graduated when I was almost 26. So I had a 20-year career from the age of 6 to 26. And dining services, I was on campus. I worked for dining services for 4.5, 5 years, then switched over to working with graduate school.
And you were managing people too, right? You were managing and having a lot of response. So how has that helped your success in your current roles in financial planning?
Was kind of jump, went to Singapore. I consider it a semester abroad, was a great opportunity, didn't work out career-wise. Came back home defeated. We won't go too deep into that, but I came back home kind of defeated. I went over there with the intent of making a career out of that opportunity, and it didn't work out for various reasons. Came back to Perryton. I was so defeated, I thought I was just going to stay on the farm and be done with it. That's how down in the dumps I was. Well, 2 weeks of building fence with my dad changed that whole, I'm going to be a farmer again deal. Yeah, no, the old man took me out. We built fence. It was late spring, early summer. And then I realized the Texas Tech faculty was starting that, what was it, an 8-week review course, 10-week review course in Lubbock. I'd come back from Singapore. I'd saved up enough money. I signed up for that course, moved back to Lubbock,
I mean, it was like a couple thousand. It was like, what, about $2,000 or something? Yeah. It was some money for guys that didn't have any money.
Yeah, I had 4, 5, 6 grand saved up from Singapore. Didn't spend a whole lot of money there. Came back, lived with 2 of the other guys that were studying with. They had a house in Tech Terrace area, had a spare bedroom, and I had a mattress on the floor, spare bedroom, just helping them pay rent, and studied 6 days a week, take 1 random day off each week. And I'd signed up for, it was like, okay, CFP, get it done.
Why did you take the CFP exam?
It was the lowest hanging fruit to grab when you're kind of desperate and needing to right yourself. You know, I wasn't in a deep fit of depression, but I was like, man, I came out with a leadership award named after me, and my first job was a flame out, 3 months.
You felt like you didn't live up to expectations.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But my old man humbled me pretty quick. So that's a good thing about having the farm. We've all slept in the basement at the farm. Everybody's hit the skids in our family. And that's what, having a home base like that is very beneficial. And I know not everybody has something like that. But yeah, really, a couple of weeks feeling sorry for myself. CFP review, let's go tackle that. And that was my sole focus at the time. I'll look for a job after that.
And what was your study? Because we were in that same review class. What was your daily routine to pass that exam?
I think and I wrote an article about this, and I've got it tagged on my LinkedIn profile, and 6 days a week for sure. I think we were in class 4 days, or was it?
It was in the evenings though. Yeah, nights, right.
Whatever days we had class, I studied all day. So I'd study before class, we'd go to class, and I'd finish up. So you've got a good heavy, let's call it 6 quality hours of in-depth, back-to-back, uninterrupted studying. And on days we didn't have class, I spent at least 4 hours in the stacks.
That's the library for the listeners.
There we go. Yeah, in the library. You can rent little study cubicles up in the upper floors. I got one of those. I don't even think it was rent. It just, you sign up for it, and just stayed at it. The biggest thing in my article, though, is I knew how serious the exam was. And thank you to the late Professor Barnhill for over-preparing us in his estate planning class for how demanding that exam is. And I wanted to make sure that I only did it once. So putting the time and effort into it and really attacking it and figuring out early what I did not need to study. I had an undergraduate degree in corporate finance and a master's degree in personal finance. The investment section, the fundamentals section, I never even opened the investment section of the study materials. I had a hard time with retirement and estate in class going through the degree program. Those parts of my books were just destroyed and marked up and repetition over and over. But I legitimately did not open the investment section of the books.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking about this the other day when I was getting ready for this. There were a couple guys from a wirehouse, which is going to remain nameless. They were a lot older than us, had more experience, and they loved the investments. They knew everything about the investments, but they didn't pass the exam when we took it. And I remember I asked them what happened, and they said, we studied the investments too much because that's what we liked. You know, like, well, appreciate the honesty, but did not work out for you.
No. Well, your brain tricks you. If you've just studied any behavioral finance or behavior, you want to study the things you know because you get the answers right. You get that endorphin rush.
You feel good.
You feel good. I wanted to feel miserable. I wanted to do it once. And if I got to the end of that and felt like I wasn't just exhausted and tired, and do I really want to do this for a living, I wouldn't have studied enough. You have to over-prepare. You can't just get enough. But it's right. You've got to figure out what you already know and trust that you already know it. And you got to use that extra time for the harder parts, retirement planning and estate planning. And the funny thing is, I remember being in Dr. Hampton's class, retirement planning, for this review. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went off, and all those regulations for all the different kinds of plan, it literally just in my brain, everything connected. And it was that light bulb aha moment. It finally makes sense, because I struggled through her class, got through it, didn't do bad, but it was almost like root memorization. It hadn't become part of me yet. And that review course everything just congealed together and coalesced. But you've got to understand how you study and put the time in. And I break down the time in my article of, on a piece of paper, write CFP. Everything that's more important than that exam to you, put above it. If you're married, put your spouse's name. If you have kids names above the CFP. If you have a job, odds are you're not going to be able to study at work. Put your job above the CFP and start mapping out the amount of time you've got. If you're studying over, the 250-hour rule of thumb, if you've got 2 months dedicated to studying for that exam and you can put those amount of hours in 2 months, it's probably a decent rule of thumb, as long as you're not studying things you don't need to be studying. But if you've got enough things above the CFP exam that are requiring your time, you've got to stretch out. You can't put 250 hours in 4 months. It's just not condensed enough for you to retain it. So if you need 400 hours to study, I'd say maybe 3 months. I've never researched it. It's just kind of a feel of you can't spread 250 hours over longer than 2 months. It's not, at least for my study habits, wouldn't have been dense enough.
Everybody's different, right? So we got through that, and then that was back when it was the 2-day, 10-hour, and we drove, and you and I had to stay in some hotel. Remember that? We stayed in a hotel.
Yeah, we split a hotel in Dallas, at the University of Dallas, I think is where we took our exam. We didn't talk to each other. You'd think we were complete strangers, but both of us had a singular focus on that exam. Neither of us chit-chatted with people after the first day of the exam, didn't let anybody get in our heads. You really would have thought we were strangers.
I mean, I felt like I was leading the masters or something. I had to sleep on the lead. It's like, now you don't have to do that anymore. And I'm always ribbing my students about, it's 2-3 hour sessions on a computer now, but I'm not holding a grudge.
Yeah, we walked uphill both ways in the snow for our exam, but, I don't begrudge the people before us that got to take the module.
Right. Let's fast forward. So then you got I think it was Waddell and Reed or somewhere. When did you get hooked up with Neal Financial Group?
It was summer 2006. So plan A didn't work out. I needed to get any job in the industry. That's where Waddell and Reed came in. And I know Daniel Yerger did a recent one. He had a similar experience. I saw them as the least worst. They had a financial planning component and led with a plan. So plan A didn't work out. The guy I was interviewing with, short story, ended up his oldest daughter wanted to join the family business. So she took my spot that I'd been interviewing for 2 months. I was like, okay, plan B. Waddell and Reed had been recruiting me. It's eat what you kill, come in 200 names of your friends and family and get going. So I struggled and borrowed money, credit card debt for 3.5 years. Fast forward, I meet Lynette. She wasn't plan A either. I was interviewing with different RIAs at the time, mid-2000s, 2005, 2006, and I just wasn't fit. I was interviewing and I wouldn't get the offer. And one of them that I was really excited about in Memphis, again, interviewed a few times, didn't get the offer. And I asked the hiring manager why. And over the phone, he goes, "You really want to know?" And I said, "Yes, please." Well, he went through all the different aspects of why the team really didn't think I was a fit. Talked too much, wanted too much access, ownership. And I thanked him, and he was kind of shocked that I thanked him for that. And I said, none of that's going to change about me. I'm looking in the wrong place. Even though I did not want to go, Winnett Stutz was with LPL, independent, grouped up with Neal Financial Group, a silo type practice. I just wanted a paycheck after 4 years of eating what I kill and starving to death. I literally pulled Winnett's after Dina Katz called me and asked me why I hadn't called Winnett back. Well, Winnett called Dina because she told Winnett I was going to call her, and I never did. I threw it in the trash. And they rattled my cage a little bit. I called Winnett down here in Houston. Never thought I'd live here. Scheduled a time to come down. Met with Winnett and Doug Neal. We went to an FPA meeting in Houston. And I knew as many people at the Houston FPA, even though I'd never worked here, lived here through Texas Tech. And I was on FPA committees with you and DFW when you were building Career Data Box. Well, Melissa ran the DFW up and the Houston. So I knew quite a few people, and we connected and started working June 2006. Winnett brought me in to be her succession. She was almost 70 years old when we met in 2006. She just turned 85. I still stay in contact with her. But she brought me in. I was her third trying to do an internal succession plan. Other people had moved on, for whatever reasons, didn't work out. But it wasn't where I thought I wanted to be. I was looking in the wrong place for various reasons. And
It was a fit, though.
it was a fit. She was able to pay me salary. And
You eventually took over her clients.
right, I bought in the end of 2015. She retired. She was 77, and I bought her book from her. And I paid her 100%, even though we had built it over the last 10 years together. She paid me a salary in the beginning. Then we went to a revenue split. Everything flowed through her rep ID and LPL broker-dealer setup. And by the time she retired, I was taking 55% of the revenue. She was taking 45%. She made the decision to retire. And 10 years was kind of the original arc that we'd looked at. And she retired. I bought the book of business for her. That was 8 years ago. And we had brought in an intern from tech, and that intern turned into my paraplanner.
How many client relationships did you transition over and buy from her?
Say 115, 110, I think. And I've got about 125, 130 relationships, family relationships now. I'd say 60 of them are very active, more on the comprehensive, higher level of service.
So you stayed under that model with Neal Financial Group, even though when that was gone, and then recently you had a change. So walk us through that.
So recently, starting on January 1st, I joined forces. I'm merging into BentOak Capital. Their main office is out of Weatherford. They've got a Fort Worth office and a Lubbock office, but they're also on the LPL platform. They're a hybrid. They're on the hybrid LPL platform. Neal Financial Group was a hybrid, but they didn't custody any assets under Neal Financial Group. It was just planning only.
Yeah, explain what a hybrid is.
For Neal Financial Group, all assets were held at LPL under the corporate RIA, even though Neal Financial Group had a separate RIA for planning only. All assets were there. With BentOak, they're on LPL's hybrid platform. Lack of a better term, they utilize LPL more as a custodian, and they've got their own RIA. The assets are held under the RIA's umbrella, and planning is also done under the RIA umbrella. And some of this I'm still learning as I go, as far as different kinds of structures. But the best way to think about it is BentOak utilizes LPL as a custodian, where Neal Financial Group was the BD relationship. And there's a lot of crossover when you get into the nitty-gritty of it. But in 2019, my paraplanner that I had hired when Lynette retired got recruited away from me to a bigger firm, and we'd had interns. And then that was September of 2019, and then COVID hit. So we all, and I think I put this in my write-up, we woke up one day and it was the middle of 2022. So luckily, the licensed assistant that was part of Neal Financial Group was able to take over the bulk of the service duties that my paraplanner was doing. But I had made an offer to the paraplanner to, at my size, about $100 million under management. You're either a paraplanner or a partner. Jason McGarraugh doesn't have a planning team and an investment team for whatever reasons. And I know, but it's not my story to tell. I actually helped her close her contract with her new employer and squeeze a little bit more money out of them for her. So we ended on good terms.
You lost her to a bigger firm, right?
I lost her to a bigger firm.
How'd that make you feel as a firm owner, like training someone that losing them?
It was the best fit for her. Speaking as a fiduciary to my employee, which if we're going to be fiduciary, we might as well be fiduciary everywhere. It ended up being the right fit for her because she belonged running a planning team, which she does now. There wasn't enough of that going on with my client base. Ownership really wasn't what she was striving for. She's still young, fresh out of college, 4 years in the business. Couldn't blame her a bit. It ended up being fortuitous because of the pay cut we all took when the early 2020 hit. But it was fun helping her negotiate a contract because they didn't see that coming. The firm she's leaving is helping her.
Tell us, so BentOak, why did you join them? And it sounds like you just merged in. Was there any more to the transaction?
There's a lot. It's 2 years of me, let's say, like we woke up in 2022. So a year and a half of me really looking at what I need to do. I was at capacity for a one-person shop with a part-time administrative licensed assistant. And you start thinking about those things. 5 years ago, the conversation in Lubbock at Opportunity Days was, there's McGarraugh, the pinnacle lifestyle practice guy. And I've surprised a few of our colleagues with my decision to join up with a firm and eventually be an employee of that firm. But there'll be some executive duties that come along there, some bit of ownership. We're still not to the point of completely getting that structure put on paper, but it's coming. The idea was to get me reconnected. So since they were on the LPL platform, we just did an OSJ switch, which is one form, Doug Neal signed. And the reason you keep things quiet when you're still part of a BD is that OSJ can gum the works up because they've got to authorize the transfer to the new OSJ, Officer of Jurisdictory Supervision. You're a compliance guy, the guy you pay a lot of money to look at your email.
It sounds like he didn't fight you on it.
No, well, I went in with the form signed, and it was a fiercely independent shop, and I got no bad words to say about my former group. It's just after Winnett retired, a few other advisors retired, the atrophy or that team structure that we had 18 years ago was gradually just starting to deteriorate and wasn't a place. Like I said, I've already had one 20-year span. I'm finishing up my second 20-year span of a career. Now I'm looking at, over the last 2 years, what's my next 20 years going to be? I'm 46.
Oh, I thought you said you were going to retire.
No, I'm 46. Another 20 years puts me at 66. My foreign blood, whatever you want to call it, you don't stop working. My father's 76 and he's still actively working. So what I want the next 20 years to look like, and another 20 years of that lifestyle practice where I'm at capacity. There are virtual paraplanners, virtual admins, but I've got too much of a runway. I'm not going to let it die on the vine. So it was a lot of years of listening to podcasts like you and Michael Kitces and got brain trusts everywhere. How have our friends done things? But being around like-minded people looking in the same direction of the industry, and really I wanted a more robust client service model for my clients that's not just a step above what the solo practitioner can provide, but multiple steps above what the solo practitioner can provide.
You said something you said, what I heard was, I did this for my clients so they have it better, versus other people I talk to on this podcast, but also every day in the recruiting business. It's like, well, who's going to pay me the most? That's where I'm moving my clients. That's a different mindset.
I'm not getting paid the most, not getting underpaid, but it's because I looked at, we've got friends, the Quest and Mercer route. My wife and I looked at possibly moving up to Colorado Springs a year and a half ago, and I was looking at different options, Mercer, and they just didn't feel right for whatever reason. And we've all seen different kind of buyout structures. BentOak Capital, I'm actually going to bring the age up a little bit for them. They're all mid to late 30s. There's a few of us that I'd call the young Gen Xers that are in there, but they're seeing some of these other acquisitions go on, and whether they're able to avoid that 20 years from now or not, they have an intention to try to avoid that and do the right thing for the clients and also second and third generation employees going forward.
Well, how was the deal structured though, Jason? I mean, you moved your clients and you said, look, you guys just keep the revenue and pay me a salary, or what is it? How did it work?
We don't have a deal structured yet. This initial phase, when we did the switch in January, is just the OSJ switch, no override. Because we were going through, one of the funny things is I called Brandon Garrett up. I had just hired Heath Jackson to do consulting because I was looking at, okay, if I'm going to do this myself, I've got to get serious, hire a consultant to help me sift through my business structure and my clients, and what am I going to need to do to upgrade to an existing clientele I had, but with a practice as old as mine, going back to when that started, over 30 years old. You get this service model that's stretched out. You've got small clients that were there at the very beginning that you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have them, but it's almost like some of the bigger clients are supplementing. It's things we've all kind of see if you've been in the business long enough. And I hired Heath. A couple of weeks after Heath and I started going through my book, I called Brandon. I was like, if there's only one LPL shop on the planet that I'd be willing to talk to, because I did not want to repaper my clients. Going to from an LPL to a Schwab or to a Fidelity or Raymond James, another organization there, I wanted to save my clients that headache if I could, because I was willing to do it all myself, stay on the LPL platform, get my own RIA, be a hybrid that way. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But I called Brandon up, and he paused for a second and said, McGarraugh, 2 weeks ago, I almost called you. And then I find out he hired we hired the same
That's
consultant.
crazy.
And then they specialize in engineers or data-dependent clients and farm and ranch families. Well, I'm in Houston. I have a ton of data-dependent engineer clients, and I've got a farm and ranch background. So
it's not a fit at all, is it? Not a fit. Yeah.
Not a fit at all. So in Weatherford, and most of everybody in that firm is from some type of smaller community, but they wanted access to the Houston area because recruiting, really, how many people are you going to be able to recruit and get to live in your or work in your Lubbock office or your Weatherford office? They've got the Fort Worth office, but having another metroplex for internal recruiting and, client access and stuff too. So it was a good fit, minimal to no work from the client's perspective, everything transferred over. There'll be some adjustments from the corporate RIA to the hybrid RIA setup, but account numbers don't change. History's not lost. Yeah, I was doing the right thing by my clients. And that goes back to Lynette. When she brought me on, she had offers for people to buy her book, bring her in, fold her in. But at her age, being in her mid to late 60s, they all wanted her 2 years, 3 years in Europe. Absorb. There was no buy and grow. There was a buy and bye-bye. And she refused to do that to her clients because she knew in her heart the top part of her client base would be taken care of, but most of them would probably die on the vine, atrophy. So that kind of goes back to my predecessor, that desire to do the right thing by the client.
Really cool story. Really cool story. I mean, it's been great going down sort of memory lane with you on this and how it unfolded and just sort of how your career's developed and the success you've had. I mean, any final tips or anything for the new planner community out there that you want to leave them with?
I'm a big component of, I've worked all my life and I've built careers, multiple career paths through working. If you can do it, make those mistakes, learning how to work as early as you can. When it comes to studying for the CFP exam, really understand how difficult it is and how demanding it is. Get a mentor, get multiple mentors, reach out to those of us that have been in the industry for a while. There's a reason we go back to Lubbock for opportunity days, to Texas A&M for their events and national gatherings for FPA and NAPA and all of those. Don't sit at a table with all your friends. Not one of them's going to give you a job. To pull something from Dr. Gustafson, just don't sit with them. They can't give you a job.
Well, Jason, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate the time. I really do.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the New Planner Podcast. If you're ready to discover the top career paths for financial planners and see which track is best for you, we created a free guide to help you. Grab your copy of the Financial Planner Career Roadmap at newplannerrecruiting.com/roadmap. There, you'll also find more tools and resources all created to help you build a successful financial planning career. Tune back in next week for another episode, and until then, we're here to help you succeed.